Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange, and today I'm here to bring you another round of recommendations. This time I'm talking about adult fantasy audiobooks. And if you don't know, I read a lot of audiobooks and I want to highlight some of my favorites when it comes to the genre. These are specifically books that I think are enhanced by the audiobook experience. I really like the narrators, and hopefully this will give you some new recommendations. I do have links down below if you want to check out Libro FM or Scribd, but these are just really good books to consume if you want something to put in your ears. I've done a video like this before for fantasy, so I'm going to have that linked in the cards and description box, as well as I've done similar videos for science fiction and horror, so check out those as well if you're, like me, pretty obsessed with audiobooks. All that being said, let's get into the recommendations. First, I want to recommend The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, which is the first book in the Kingkiller Chronicles, and this follows a man who is telling a story in an inn over 3 days, essentially explaining how he became the infamous Kingkiller. And in the first book, we specifically follow him through his childhood years, his growing up, and how he learned magic and went to a magic school. And I've always been really intimidated to get into this series, but I tried the audiobook version and actually found it really easy to get into. I'm a big fan of the audiobook narrator Nick Podell because I think that he does a really good performance. So I think that he does really good inflections and really brings the characters to life and just made the story really easy to consume. I tend to worry that epic fantasy can be very just complicated and hard to understand when you're listening to it, but I found the story very easy to follow. It's not overly complicated in terms of world building, and it really is so much about this one character. And again, by getting that audiobook performance, you really get to know him very personally, and I just thought it was very easy to consume. It is a very long audiobook, but that can actually be a plus for a lot of people, especially those that are using credits on Libro FM or Audible, because you kind of want to get your bang for your buck. So if you're okay with a longer audiobook, I definitely recommend trying the series this way. I thought it was a really great performance. Next, I want to recommend Sufficiently Advanced Magic by Andrew Rowe. This follows a young man who, at the beginning of the story, is going through a series of tests in order to get into a magic school. His end goal is to go through the school, graduate, and then hopefully find his brother who went missing years ago. And I want to recommend this book specifically to those that perhaps have already read The Name of the Wind on audio and are looking for more by the same narrator, because this is also done by Nick Podell, and I think he does a really great job. Once again, he really brings the characters to life, and I just love his performances. This book has a lot of humor in it. The main character is very likable. He's a bit insecure, still finding his way, and it's definitely more lighthearted than some of the other ones I'm going to suggest here. And I think that Nick Podell really portrays that in his performance. It's just entertaining, and especially when a book is a little bit more funny, I find that it works better when the story is told to me rather than me reading it on the page. And so I flew through the first one. I've also read the second one on audio, and again, I just think it's a really good narration and the kind of fantasy story that works really well in audiobook form, because like Name of the Wind, this is told in like a first-person perspective, so you get this very intimate tale told in a very intimate way and get to know the main character very well. So highly recommend it. I feel like it's a little bit more underhyped, but well worth your time. Next, I want to recommend a personal favorite of mine, and that is Jade City by Fonda Lee, which is the first book in her epic urban fantasy trilogy. And this is a series that I tried on audio just by chance and absolutely fell in love. So the general setup for this is that we follow crime families in this Asian-inspired state that is never quite named, so it's like our world but not quite. And in this version of our world, there's a substance called jade, and these different crime families, almost like a mafia, are trying to control the substance because it allows them to enhance their powers. These families learn martial arts, and this jade does not give them perhaps superpowers, but just enhances their martial abilities. So in order to keep up and fight, you need to have jade, and it's all about this jade control. It's this story full of drama and political intrigue and double crossing and twists and turns. It is so addictive, and I really think that I fell in love with it even more so because I read the audiobook. And I think I found this book just randomly searching through my library's e-collection, and thankfully they had a copy. And oh my goodness, the narrator puts on such a performance. He brings the characters to life. It's told from multiple points of view, and each character is distinctive and has such a powerful voice, and you will feel all the emotions, and the audiobook narrator just brings it all together. It's so well done. It's honestly the only way I want to read the story at this point, because the narrator is the voice of those characters in my mind, and the performance just really uplifts the story, which is already amazing, but the audiobook narration just makes it even better. Next, I want to recommend The Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson, which is a fantasy novella that follows a young woman who works as a forger. She is caught by the ruling kingdom, and rather than killing her or throwing her in jail, they end up making a deal forcing her to help to forge the soul of the king or emperor who has died, and essentially try to bring him back to life, which is forbidden and may not even be possible. The story follows her over the days as she is trying to do this and stay alive, and it's very short, so I don't want to give away too much of the plot. This is of course a novella, so it is much shorter, so again you have to decide if you're someone who enjoys shorter audiobooks, this one might appeal to you. And I realize that a lot of people, when they go to recommend fantasy books from Brandon Sanderson, always go to Michael Kramer's work. I have a super unpopular opinion that I don't love his narration. I do not hate it, but it doesn't really work for me very well. However, this narrator just really, again, brought the story to life, made it easy to follow, and it was one I actually ended up purchasing because I just thought it was very enjoyable. So highly recommend that one if you're looking for a shorter story to fly through and have not yet picked up this book. It's definitely worthwhile and a little bit more underhyped than some of Brandon Sanderson's more epic work. From there, I want to recommend The Sword of Kagan by M.L. Wang, and this is told over a dual perspective, one being a mother and then her son. They are on this little island at the edge of the empire, and at this place they are all tasked to train in order to protect their nation. The boy soon learns a lot about political pressuring and the different political agendas that are pushing their specific island to protect the nation, and there's just a lot of propaganda happening. You also get the mother's backstory, and you see how everything comes together as the story leads to an epic climax. And I want to recommend this one on audio because I really did think that the audiobook performance, again, like I'm saying with all these, uplifted the experience. So this is a book that I liked, but honestly personally didn't love. I know a lot of other booktubers swear by this book, but I do think that the narrator really did bring the characters to life. He gave a really good performance. There is a lot of emotional things that happen in these books, and the narrator really does give a voice to that, and so you really do feel what the characters are feeling and get to feel those highs and lows. And so if you're looking for an audiobook, one that's perhaps a little bit more underhyped, I thought that the performance in this one was very well done. Next, I want to recommend Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse, which is a fantasy inspired by pre-Columbian cultures that is told over multiple points of view that involves political intrigue, different magic systems, and gods and mythologies. And it's very unique. I want to recommend it specifically on audio because I really thought that the audiobook performance made the story so much easier to follow because there are a lot of moving parts. It's not a book that's easy to summarize. It has dual narrators, which I really appreciate when you have multiple perspectives, each having their own distinctive voice. Helped me a lot to differentiate. And they're also own voices because, of course, this is not a story of Caucasian characters, so they actually brought in voice actors or voice narrators at least that represent the different cultures that this book is inspired by, and I just thought it was beautiful, well done. And again, it's a very complicated story in some ways. You aren't given all of the information at once. Instead, you slowly learn the world building and the magic as you go along. But because it's told to the reader, I found that it was very easy to follow and not worry if I wasn't necessarily picking up every detail. Eventually, it all comes together in a very satisfying way. And when it starts to click, click in place. It's just very enjoyable, so definitely recommend the audiobook version for this one. This is one I got through the Libro FM review program and was really thankful to experience the book this way. From there, I want to recommend The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, and this follows a young orphan girl named Rin who works hard to get into a prestigious military school. The first part of the first book follows her learning the different magic systems and learning how to fight, and then towards the end of the book, a war breaks out and she has to use that expertise and actually start to fight. And this is the start of an epic trilogy I absolutely love, and specifically I want to recommend the audiobook version because it is done by one of my favorite narrators, and that is Emily Wu Zeller. I originally read this series, or at least the first book, physically and really enjoyed it, but then when I went back and reread these books, I went back through the audio and fell in love with the series even more. This is a Chinese-inspired fantasy, so I really appreciate them getting an own voices narrator. I think she did a great job with the pronunciations, to my knowledge of some of the words that were used, and just really brings a lot of life and emotion to a book that has a lot of pain in it. So it's not a nice book. This is definitely grimdark fantasy, and Emily Wu Zeller's performance just delivers. And finally, the last book I want to recommend is Phoenix Extravagant by Yoon-Ha Lee. And this is the story of a young artist who gets drafted into the military in order to fix a dragon-like construct and use their artistry for this purpose. However, they begin to question this and they get tied into the rebellion that is brewing, and things go from there. At the time of recording this, it is a standalone fantasy, so very accessible. And the reason I want to recommend the audiobook version is, just like the last book I talked about, this one is also read by Emily Wu Zeller, who, if you can't tell, is a huge favorite of mine. I've also read her science fiction that she's narrated by Yoon-Ha Lee, his 9 Fox Gambit series, and so if you enjoy that and are looking for fantasy, this is an excellent one to check out. It's not overly long, it's easy to get to, and honestly, her performances are so good. At this point, I will pretty much read any book she narrates, regardless of genre. I will give it a try because she has made me fall in love with so many books. Highly, highly recommend her as a narrator, and obviously highly recommend Phoenix Extravagant. I originally read it as a physical book, as an ARC before it was published, and then have gone on to reread it as an audiobook and just love it even more. So definitely wanted to check out. So that is it. We've made it to the end of the video. I'd love to know if you're planning on checking out any of the books I talked about here, and I would also love to hear from all of you. What are your favorite adult fantasy audiobooks? Don't forget that I have done a video like this before, so I'm going to have that again linked in the cards and description box if you want to check out more fantasy or more sci-fi or horror. And if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing. I do read a lot of these genres, and if you're already subscribed, thank you so much. You can still help me out by giving this video a thumbs up, sharing it around online in places like Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit, and you can click that little notification bell so that you never miss a video from me. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.